Hey everyone, welcome to Backstage with PV3. This is the place to go, the place to be. If you want to grow your movement, grow your message, get your word out to everybody, and expand your audience, have a greater impact and a greater income. I am Pat Quinn, sitting in for Pete Vargas today, and you are in the right place. You are Backstage with PV3. And have I got a special treat today? I have a good friend of mine who is our special guest today, and she is a great case study. The reason we're having her on today is because she is a great case study of using stages to grow your movement, to get your message out, to grow your business. And she has step by step used other people's stages and her own stages to help promote herself, to help build her brand, to help grow her message and her movement, and to move products and services. And so if that's something that you want to do, this is going to be a great chance for you to learn how to do it from one of the very best in the world. And so can you join me in welcoming to Backstage with PV3, Renée Marino. Hey, Renée, how are you today?
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here.
We are excited that you're here, Renée. And for those people that don't know you, I know your story. I know you've been on Broadway. I know you've toured with Broadway shows. I even know I accidentally didn't know I'd seen you when I took my kids to see High School Musical years ago. But you've been in Broadway shows. You've been in major motion pictures. Give us the lowdown on Renée Marino.
Yes. Well, performing was always my first love as a little girl. And through perseverance, facing years and years of rejections and no's, I still made my Broadway debut happen. And I've had the honor of being a part of 5 different Broadway shows. And in 2013, I was performing as Frankie Valli's wife in Jersey Boys on Broadway. And one Sunday matinee, Pat, I look out into the audience, and staring back at me was the legend himself, Clint Eastwood, who was going to be directing the film version of Jersey Boys. And they began calling people in from our cast to audition, and they happened to be looking for someone to play my role of Mary Delgado. So my agent and I tried and tried to get me an appointment, but she called me one day and she said, Renée, I'm so sorry. They said they won't give you an appointment, which is like an interview, for the role of Mary Delgado, but they'll give you one for one of the smaller roles, one of the angels who sings My Boyfriend's Back. And I hung up that phone, Pat, so disappointed and confused, but I still went in to audition for an angel. And I'm sitting in the audition room, and the casting director says, Renée, would you like to sing the song first, My Boyfriend's Back, or read the scene? And at that moment, Pat, I heard this little voice within say, you have to do this. It feels too right. And I looked at the casting director in the eyes and I said, you know, Jeff, I was really hoping to come in and read for the role of Mary Delgado. And he looks back at me and he says, I was just thinking the same thing. Well, weeks go by and my agent calls and says, you're Mary Delgado in the movie. Clint Eastwood loves you. And it was one of the most surreal moments of my life. But the craziest part was that once I started filming, with never being on a TV or film set before, you guys, this was like jumping off of a cliff. Every day I would film, I would sit and eat lunch with Mr. Clint Eastwood and ask him every question I could. And a month into the film, I'm eating with him and one of the producers of the film when they start talking about how Clint knew he wanted me for the role when he saw me on Broadway. And I said, do you want to hear a funny story? I never got an audition for the role of Mary. The only reason I got to read the scenes is because I opened up my big mouth in the room and asked. And they said, what do you mean, Renée? We requested you. We said, we want to see the girl from the Broadway show. And I found out that day that there was a middle person, casting associate, juggling a few films at once, and dropped the ball on having me come into audition. And Pat, this is the most beautiful representation of the power of communication. And when we have the ability to speak up from a place of love and grace, we open the door to limitless opportunities.
Oh, wow, Renée. This is so many lessons in one story. This is why Warren Buffett says that improving your speaking skills can increase your net worth, your personal value, by 50%. And so the story is just a great story. And am I right? Were you an understudy in Jersey Boys the day that he saw you? Were you like not supposed to even be on that day?
Yes, Pat, I was filling in for the girl who played Mary Delgado full time. It was her maternity leave. And I
Wow.
happened to be there. Yeah.
And this is a lesson for everybody out there, that you might want a big opportunity, but take the little opportunity. Like, I'm sure you wanted to have the lead role all the time in that, but you took the role of like the fill-in, the understudy, and the day that you were doing it is the day that Clint saw it, and that's when he fell in love with you. So if you all want a keynote, a big event, and you get offered a breakout, go do the breakout. If you don't get offered a breakout at that event, here's a great tip that the stage whisperer himself, Pete Vargas, taught me. Just tell the meeting planner, hey, I'm available. If any of your speakers drop out last minute, just give me a call. I'm still available. And don't be surprised if that phone rings. And if the phone doesn't ring and you don't fill in, you will still have so much built up goodwill with that meeting planner, because you were there to serve them in the event of a crisis, in the event of an emergency. You were there to serve them. So I love all the little parts of that story, of you not getting the audition that you wanted, so you asked for it, of Clint wanting you and not even knowing it. There's so many parts to that story that are all about communication. So you've been talking a lot about becoming a master communicator. I know you have a book called Becoming a Master Communicator. Everybody watching this wants to communicate more effectively, get their messages out more efficiently. What would you say to somebody, what's your number one go-to strategy for becoming a better communicator and for really getting your message out in a clear and concise way?
First and foremost is having that strong communication with self. And some of you may be saying, well, what do you mean, Renee? I'm saying I want to be a speaker on a stage. Yes, exactly. In this digital world that we're living in, we have more outlets to communicate than ever before, yet find ourselves more distracted than ever before. And the problem with this is we're not taking the time to communicate with ourselves, figure out who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, what our message is. We can't figure that out unless we've taken that time to disconnect from our devices and sit with ourselves first.
Wow, I was one of those people who's like, what are you talking about? I want to talk to other people, not talk to myself. So explain to me how getting that communication with myself, sitting without all the electronics on, just sitting and communicating with myself, what is the outcome of that? What am I trying to do with that? How does that help me become a more effective communicator?
Now you're tapping into who you are at your core, what your struggles are, what your biggest dreams are, the audience that you want to serve, and why. The why behind what we're doing is that magic ingredient that keeps us moving along when things feel hard. And also, the second case in point is it tunes us into our intuition. And when we start hearing that quiet voice of our souls, our gut instincts, that is always guiding us in the right place to go. And for me, going back to my story, if I didn't hear that quiet voice within say to me in that audition room, Renee, you have to do this. It feels too right. I may have held myself back like we all do. Oh, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't speak up. I shouldn't ask to audition. Who am I? I've never done a movie before. But instead, I listened to my gut instinct and I spoke up. And as a result, I gained one of the greatest opportunities of my life. And the same can be true for you. But we must figure out what our message is. What our message is and why it's important and how it's going to help serve those people. Because when we get fired up and passionate about it, then when we bring it to the masses and we get on those stages, it's effortless.
Nice. Now, I'm glad you talked about that little voice in your head, because I have a little voice in my head that says, you're not very good at this, even though I've done it lots and lots of times. And I'm sure I'm not alone. If you're listening to this or watching this, you want to put in the comments that you have stage fright, that you get nervous, that you sometimes freeze up. We'd love to hear from you. Any comments that you have. Renee, I don't know when it does. First of all, maybe it never stopped happening, but somewhere between your first high school play or your first middle school play and getting on Broadway, I'm sure you've learned what to do when you're nervous. You've learned what to do when that little voice pops up in your head. I know the first time I had to give a speech, I gave a speech in a church, and I thought I did a really good job. And then I went back to my seat and I said to my daughter, I did a pretty good job. And she said, why were your eyes closed the entire time you were speaking? I didn't even know it. I was so nervous. I had my eyes closed. I apparently didn't want to see the audience. I was probably picturing them in their underwear, if that's one of your tips. But I'd love to hear from you. Like, what do you do to combat that voice that says you're not very good at this? And what do you do when you're nervous, like you're shaking or you're sweating or your voice gets like crackly because it's so dry because you're so nervous? Talk to us about how you overcome that, because you've done it on the biggest stages in the world, and I'm sure you've done it on thousands of small stages too.
And guess what, Pat? Those nerves are still there. Even before I pressed enter room today for this, I still feel those butterflies and my heart's beating out of my chest. So I want you all to understand this is normal and natural, and don't try to fight it. That's where the issue comes in when we're trying to combat this thing that's natural. What I encourage you to do is look at that energy, and instead of labeling it nerves, label it excitement. Because when you think about a time when you were excited about something, it's the same physical manifestations. Your mouth goes dry, maybe you're fidgety, your stomach has all those butterflies. And remind yourself, okay, this is just energy. This is excitement, baby. All right, I'm about to get on this stage. Ooh, I'm so excited. I'm going to change people's lives. And when that voice is like, no, Renee, no one wants to hear from you. Are you kidding me? You think you're an expert? Oh, I got that voice. What I do, instead of fighting it or trying to run away from it, I thank it. And I give her a name. I call her Judy. And I say, thank you, Judy. I know you're trying to help me. You're doing what you were designed to do to protect me, but I got this. And by thanking that voice and letting it know that I don't need to fight you, that voice quiets. And then that intuition, that quiet voice, that's our inner compass, gets louder.
Wow, I have to name it Judy. Is that part of the strategy?
No, it's personal. You pick the name that works for you. I'm Judy. Yeah, I like Judy.
You have named yours Judy. That's great. You know, people who meet you, people who spend time with you, talk about this positive energy that you have. You're always smiling. And I think sometimes when we get on stage, we get so caught up in the words that we're saying. We get so caught up in our nerves. We get so caught up in the fact that there's a camera in front of me, or caught up in the fact that there's an audience that may not like me. Naturally happy people, naturally energetic people become kind of boring and become kind of like they lose their energy. But when you're on stage, I mean, I can imagine being on Broadway with 1,500 people in the audience. You've got to just project this positiveness and this confidence and this energy. What are some things we can do so that we don't lose energy? We bring the energy every single time. Do you have any strategies for that?
Yes, the work happens before you enter the space. The work happens before you step on the stage or press record on that video. And what I mean is, it's time to get your energy up. And how do we do that? By moving our bodies. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be a dancer like I've been my whole life or do a 45-minute workout. I mean, put on that playlist that makes you feel so inspired. For me, it's the Rocky soundtrack, and I play it and I move around. And what I'm doing is moving that stale energy that manifests as nerves, that manifests itself as negativity and fear, and it transforms it into fuel. And to your point, Pat, when I used to perform on Broadway, yeah, I'm about to go out and do a 12-minute dance number for thousands of people. There were times that I was like, oh my gosh. And I figured out this trick, number one, of changing nerves to excitement, but number two, keeping my body moving and activated, even if it was pacing, because it lets that energy turn into fuel for you. And then when you're on the stage and you're speaking, take the focus off of you. Me, I. Do I look okay? Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. What are they thinking of me? Instead, think, wow, I'm helping them solve their problem. I am giving the solution to thousands of people's problems right now. How can I understand them better? How can I better serve them? And when we take the focus off of ourselves, all of a sudden those nerves dissipate, because now it's not about us.
That's great. Hey, we are backstage with PV3. I am Pat Quinn, filling in for Pete Vargas today, and I'm joined by Renée Marino, who has done it all from Broadway to motion pictures. We'll go one more question about this, and then we're going to transition and talk about how you have been a case study in growing your business, growing your brand, getting your message out through other people's stages. But first, I just got to ask, because you're eating lunch with Clint Eastwood every single day while you're filming this movie, what's the number one thing you learned from Clint Eastwood that you take out and you use every day or you think about most often?
The gift of imperfection. We were filming the big breakup scene. Mary and Frankie, they are in their big moment where they're separating. And we filmed the scene once, and then Clint goes, all right, now I want you to really give it to him. And I'm like, okay. And you guys listen up, because this is a great lesson here. So I get myself fired up, and my character's really upset and she's really angry. And I start the scene again, and I start the lines, and I go, you show up for a couple of days and you think that makes you a father. And and all of a sudden I just start screaming because I forget all my lines. So for those of you who forget what you're about to say when you're on stage, guess what? You're not alone. And a few seconds later, Pat, I pick it up. We finish the scene and he yells cut, and Clint goes, that was it. And I go, Clint, I forgot all my lines. He goes, I don't care. It was real and it was raw, and that's good. When I was filming with Meryl, and in my head, I'm like, oh my God, he's talking to me about Meryl Streep. He goes, she used to do 1,000,000 takes of her scenes till they were perfect. Until I recorded one of her rehearsal takes and she saw how organic it was, she never did 1,000,000 takes again. And that was the moment where I realized, wow, it's not about perfection. It's about imperfection, because human beings by nature are imperfect. And when we flub our words sometimes, or maybe we go off on a tangent or two, but we are in our authenticity and we're sharing our message with love, that's when people relate to us, because they're imperfect just like we are. So that was the greatest lesson I took away.
Well, we are getting it all today, folks. Lessons from Meryl Streep, from Clint Eastwood, and Renée Marino, author of Becoming a Master Communicator. And so you have been using OPSs, other people's stages, and you've been leveraging those to grow your audience, to grow your business, and to sell books. I mean, so talk to us about that process. Like when you're on a Broadway show, like you've got a stage, you know exactly where to go every night, 8 times a week, I think you get to do it. But when you're trying to promote a business, like there's not 8 stages a week just hanging out, waiting for us to walk in with a paying audience. Talk to us about the process of how you've been finding stages, how you've been communicating with them. Talk to us about how you've used OPSs to kind of get the word out about you.
Connection, connection, connection. What I teach is the communication of creating genuine connections, because those connections are what lead to business growth, better relationships, increased self-confidence. And for getting on other people's stages, it starts with that outreach. Going into your phone, going into your email list, and looking at the people that you already have a connection to. Reach out to them. Let them know what you're doing. This is what I have done. So I'm speaking from direct experience here. Reaching out. When my book came out, I let everybody who I've ever spoken to know I have this brand new book that came out. It's already made it to Barnes & Noble and Amazon bestseller. I'd be so honored if you grab a copy or get a copy for someone you love. And here's the truth, everyone. Maybe 50 to 60% of people won't answer, but those 40% will answer. And those people will then connect with another person and share your book. And the same holds true for me now speaking. I've been speaking all summer. It's been such a gift, Pat. And it all started with me outreaching. And the way I do my outreach is I send an email, and I also send a video, communicating through video to say, hey, Pat, Renée Marino here. I first want to say thank you so much for what you've taught me over these past few years. Learning the signature talk from you has changed my life. And I'm using it right now as I share the message of my book, Becoming a Master Communicator. Here's the situation. It would be such an honor for me to get on your stage to speak to your audience about the power of communication, because with your audience, mostly being business owners, this is what they need. Communication is the foundation of every business. So I'd love to connect further. Here's my email. I'd love to talk this over again. And I just want to say thanks again. Have a great day. And I put that in a video. And I put that video in an email. So now whether they prefer to watch it or read the words, I'm attacking that from both angles. And as a result, Pat, since January, I've been on 45 stages. 45 stages that have been through pure outreach. And because I am creating genuine connections with the people that I meet, they're remembering me for, oh, wow, there's this summit coming up. Would you like to speak on it? Absolutely. And then when I'm on the stage, I'm speaking, I'm doing my signature talk, and I've been speaking to sell. So I don't take a speaking fee, and I sell my course. And as a result, my business has been flourishing in the past 8 months just using these techniques.
This is a masterclass. Those of you who've been along with us for quite a while, you're hearing things that you've already heard Pete Vargas say. Use champions. Reach out to your champions. They will open doors for you. When you have a stage opportunity, use a first impression video. If you didn't realize it, that's what Renee just modeled for us, was a first impression video. And then when you get on stage, give your signature talk with a clear call to action, and you are going to have the opportunity to grow your business every time you do this. Thank you for, in 3 minutes, Renee, encapsulating what Pete has been teaching so many for so long that we all have benefited from. That was awesome. Have podcasts been part of this equation? I'm curious to hear about podcasts, how they've worked for you, and your experience getting on podcasts.
Yes, the podcasts have been incredible. I had a really rare opportunity that came up through speaking in December. I spoke for an author's mastermind out in the Outer Banks. And there I met an incredible gentleman whose son has a very, very successful podcast. And Dan Miller, you all may know Mr. Dan Miller, his son, Kevin Miller, is the host of the Self-Helpful Podcast, which was formerly the Zig Ziglar podcast. And Kevin and I connected through his father. He interviewed me for his podcast. We had such a great connection that he's now brought me on about 5 different times to co-host with him. So now I get to co-host with him. We went through Michael Hyatt's book, Terry Cole, these amazing game changers in the personal development space that I've had the honor of co-hosting their interviews. So they would have an interview with Kevin, and then we have an interview to talk about what we learned through their interaction. And this opportunity only came about, Pat, because of my ability to create these genuine connections. And those connections happen because I take the time to listen in a complete way when I meet people. And I take the time to not just talk about me, I, and all the things I've done, but I take an interest to say, hey, so I'd love to hear what you're working on. Because all human beings want to do is feel seen, heard, and understood. So remember that when it comes to your business and potential clients, seek to understand and not just be understood. So doing that has been a game changer for me.
Connections, connections, connections. It really is like this string of this person introduced me to this person who introduced me to this person who introduced me to this person. I love that. And if you're listening to this and you want to use podcasts to grow your business, have we got a great actionable item for you here today? We have the 1-2 punch to getting on other people's podcasts, the 1-2 punch to get on new podcasts. And you can download that for free at 10xstages.com/punch, PUNCH, 10xstages.com/punch. And you can download the 1-2 punch to get on a new podcast. It's a step-by-step guide for you to get on other people's podcasts. You just heard how Renee got on one podcast. Then that introduced her. She got asked to co-host that podcast, all the people that she's met because of that, all of the opportunities. And that's one podcast. Think if you would reach out to 50 podcasts, get on 10 of those podcasts, how your business would grow, how many people you would meet. And the other thing I love about podcasts, Renee, they're the gift that keeps on giving. I was on Brad Johnson's podcast, I think 5 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, I got a call from somebody who said, hey, I heard you on Brad's podcast. I was wondering if I could work with you. Like, that's 4.5 years later, somebody heard me. It's the gift. These things sit out there, and people who discover a podcast go back and listen to all the back episodes. And then they call you out of the blue and they're like, oh, you were on Brad's podcast. And I was like, yeah, in 2018, I was on that podcast, I think. I mean, that's how great podcasts are. So if you'd like to be on podcast, you can download the 1-2 punch to getting on new podcasts at 10xstages.com/punch. Now, we've been texting a bit back and forth, Renee, in the last week or so, setting up this conversation. And every time I text you, you're like, I'm going on a morning show. I'm going on a news show. I'm going on this TV show. And you text me a picture of you in a different TV studio. I want to hear about the use of media, because one of the OPSs that we don't talk about that much is media, like local news shows. So I know one of the pictures you sent, I think you were in Washington, D.C., and you were on some morning show with some morning hosts sitting on the couch. Now, this isn't the Today Show, just so we all understand. This isn't like you're on the Today Show, a national show. You're going on a local morning show. Talk to us about this. Is this hard to get? Does it pay off? Is it a good way to grow your business? Talk to us about this strategy, because I think it's another OPS that gets overlooked sometimes.
Yes, 1,000,000%. And it all starts with one small step. So 2 weeks ago, I started out a morning show in Connecticut, Great Day, Connecticut. This is a smaller scale morning show. But I ended up doing 2 segments. One was a regular 6 to 7 minute, and then they had me for a longer segment, which was about 28 minutes. So think about this, everybody. Even though this is a smaller scale live news media channel, for 28 minutes, we talked about my book, where they kept showing photos of my book on right?
The picture you sent me was you sitting on the couch with like 2 other hosts and you're holding your book up. I'm like, this is on television. And I just think did you have to go to Connecticut?
I did. And I chose to do that. So that was a personal preference because, again, I teach the communication of connection. So anytime I can be in person, I say absolutely, because that's just the next level of communication. And I encourage you all to find where you can be face-to-face, because there is something special about having that feel of oxytocin when someone shakes your hand or they're making eye contact with you as you're speaking. So yes, I did those all live. But that was a smaller news media outlet. But now, guess what, Pat? I have all of that footage to share on YouTube, my Instagram page, LinkedIn. And now when I outreach to the Today Show, because you better believe I will be, I'm using that footage to say, and just if you're curious to see how I am in an interview, I just did this 2 weeks ago. Then 2 days ago, when you and I were texting, I did 2 different morning shows. One was called Great Day Washington, and the second one was Good Day DC, which is actually the #1 morning news show in DC. Now, as you can see, it's already taking like steps up, right? One step. But that's because I say yes to these opportunities, because I know that regardless if it's a smaller scale media outlet, that is footage. And remember, we are in the day and age of digital technology. So you can use that clip forever to promote yourself. To your point, I was on Dean Graziosi's podcast 2 years ago, which is a top 1% podcast. And you better believe I have that forever. The video footage of that's on my YouTube page. And now when I outreach to people and say, listen, I've worked with people like Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, Pat Quinn, and I show them clips, they're like, wow, okay, so this girl, she's not just talking the talk, she's walking the walk. So anytime you have the opportunity to do media, whether it's at your local Kiwanis club, do it, because then you get that footage.
So these morning shows, are they easy to get on? Do you have to pay to get on them? Is it just the same first impression video you're sending out to other people's stages? You got any insider tips for us here?
Yes. Video, the power of video, my friends. Just listen to this stat. Digital marketing expert James McQuivey, estimates 1 minute of video content is equal to 1.8 million written words. So really think about that. If you're just outreaching through the words of an email or a newsletter or a text, you are missing the boat on a real connection. Put in a 30-second video with it, boom, now that's the next level of connection. So yes, doing outreach and pairing those words with the power of video.
I just think of how many people have been trying so hard to get to a conference or an association or an event with 100 people in the audience. And even though it's just little old Connecticut, even though it's the morning show on the 3rd rated network, and even though you had the 7 a.m. to 7:15 slot, like more people probably saw you on that little morning show than in 10 live stages that you would do. I mean, it really is the power of reaching out to more people. And it's one of the ways that we don't want to overlook we don't want to be, that's not our only, one that we want to try, because then you'll just be obsessed with that at the expense of doing a whole bunch of conferences and a whole bunch of other stages that could be dream stages for you. But it's certainly one that we want to have in our playbook, because it's another great way to get our message out and build our brand.
Yes. And Pat, the coolest part is that it wasn't just on the live news. It's streamed. So I had so many people reach out to me afterwards. I saw you on the live morning show. And I'm like, huh? You're in California. Well, guess what? It's 2023, people. Everything's streamed. So even if you're not in DC or Connecticut or wherever you're located, it's streamed. And again, that gets you out there. And the more people hear your name, oh my goodness, Pat Quinn, Pat Quinn, Pat Quinn. It doesn't matter. They're not analyzing where Pat Quinn's been, but they just keep hearing this guy's name. And I hear he's amazing at helping people get on stages and teaching them a signature talk. I've got to work with this Pat guy, right? It's the power of that second conversation that's going on in their heads, because they just keep hearing your name show up on different platforms. So say yes to everything. And Pat, you said this when we first started. Also, show up 100% no matter where you are. I showed up 100% on that Broadway stage, even though that wasn't my role full time. But guess what? Whether I'm practicing my talk, whether I'm in front of people doing my talk, I put 100% into what I'm doing, because then that creates muscle memory. And that shows me that every time I go to do my talk, or every time I get on a stage, it's not the first time. So make a vow to yourself to show up fully everywhere you go and in everything you do, even if it's an Instagram live.
That's great. And you never know who's going to be in the audience. I've been speaking to small groups of people. I've had a breakout session where I was hoping 100 people show up and 4 people showed up. And one guy didn't even look at me the whole time. He just had his arms folded across his chest, and he never smiled the whole time, and was probably looking at his phone the whole time. And I thought, this is a waste of time. And that's the guy who comes up to me afterwards and is like, I'd like to hire you in a corporate contract to do this 50 times across the country. And it's like, what? You didn't even listen to my presentation. He's like, I'd made the decision before I came in here. I'd heard about you from somebody else. Like it's the weirdest thing. Like you just doing it one day on Broadway, and all of a sudden Clint Eastwood is in the audience, and you never know who's going to be in the audience. You're in a local television show in Connecticut, and somebody from California calls you to hire you. Like, it's just crazy how just doing your best every single time, it pays off so much. So we are backstage with PV3 right now. I am Pat Quinn, filling in for Pete Vargas today, and I am with Renée Marino, author of the book Becoming a Master Communicator. Renée, we're just about out of time for the podcast here today. Do you have any final thoughts, things that you'd want us to remember about being a more effective communicator, using OPSs to grow our business and get our message out there? What would be your final message for us today?
Put in the action every day, small steps. Make a promise to yourself that you'll reach out to 3 to 5 people who are in your phone. Do that each day. If you could do that each day, mark my words, you're going to be getting calls to speak and do virtual interviews. And if you do that each and every day, you're going to see slowly but surely that pace is going to start to pick up. And just show up as your authentic self, whether that's on video or whether that's someone meeting you in person. Because one of the pitfalls I see people fall into nowadays is that of keyboard confidence. Having confidence when behind a screen or typing on a keyboard, when they're sending emails or they're putting up a post on social media, but they're not the same person when you meet them face to face. So vow to be your authentic self everywhere you go and in everything you do. And trust me, before you know it, your business and your life will flourish.
That is awesome. Hey, and if you want to be on more podcasts, one of those daily actions that you can take every single day to move your business forward, to move your message forward, to move your movement forward, is to reach out to podcasts. They're not hard to get on, and they last forever. They have a huge impact. And so I want you to go to 10xstages.com/punch. PUNCH, and you can get the 1-2 punch to getting on other people's podcasts. It's a step-by-step guide. If you want to grow your business through other people's podcasts, getting on podcasts, which you can do from home, you can do on your schedule, you can do them, it is so easy to do this, and you will grow your audience one step at a time so that you have a bigger impact, so that you have more income, and you leave a lasting and positive impact on the next generation. 10xstages.com/punch. Renée, I want to thank you for being here today. Thanks for being part of this. I am Pat Quinn, and on behalf of Pete Vargas, thanks for being part of Backstage with PV3.